Okay, we are now live. So we're just going to wait for one or two more people to come into the meeting room and I can get started. Oh, can you see the screen okay?
Yep, that's fine now, Emily. Yeah.
Does it keep flicking or is it all right?
It's flicking off a little bit, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. It should be okay when we start. Okay, we are going to get started. So let's start letting people in. Okay, bear with me. One moment, I'm going to stop share so that I can do some intros. Let's just let some people in. So just bear with me a minute, Jerry, and we'll just let people attend. We've got some attendees coming in.
Okay, yeah, no problems.
Here we are. I've got a few of you joining now. Hi, guys. Yeah, I'm going to promote you all to panelists. So you're welcome to share your screen and your sound if you wish to. We've got a few of you coming in. Okay. Okay, oh, lots of people coming in. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started in just one moment. So I've allowed you all to be able to pop your cameras and sound on if you wish to. You obviously don't feel you have to do today, but if you wish to, you can obviously get involved via the chat box, and you'll also have the opportunity to put your sound on and ask any questions. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to get started, and as people kind of join, we'll go from there. Welcome everyone, welcome to today's event, which is values in a remote world. So hi Karen, nice to see your face. So welcome obviously to values in a remote working world, and I'm going to hand over in a moment to Jerry Melville, who is the head of program management group at SSE, and he will be covering all things to do with what are our company values at the moment. Have they changed with the current climate and everything going on over the last year? So he's going to be looking at those in detail and asking you to participate as much as you can today, to share your experiences, to share what's happening at the moment in your companies, and then talking about the importance of values and kind of how we should be embedding those within our organisations. So I'm going to stop talking in a minute and hand over to the expert, but I'm just going to do a little bit of general housekeeping. For those of you that haven't joined us via this link before, we are going to be recording the session today. So if you missed anything, or you, I don't know about you, I've got kids at home, so I'm having to brush off now and again. So if you've got that situation like me and you're having to, your attention's drawn elsewhere, you can obviously view the recording afterwards or send it around to any colleagues that would be interested. There will be time for questions at the end, but I'm sure Jerry won't mind your question coming through as we go through, and he's got some for you guys too. And obviously, as always, if you've got things you want to participate with and you don't want to put your sound on, add it to the chat box, or add any questions as we go through as you think of them, and we can ask them. If you're watching us via the website today, then obviously you have got the chat box on the website. That does all come through to me in an email, so I can view that while we're on. So feel free to put any questions in there or add any comments in there as well today. I think that's everything. I'm just trying to think there. I suddenly threw a blank. And for those of you that haven't met me before, and I'm pretty sure looking at names, most of you have. So I'm Emily Plaistow. So I'm the Learning Experience Lead at CITF and facilitate a lot of these events. But I am going to start recording, and without further ado, I'm going to pass over to the expert who's going to be covering all this exciting session and stuff with us today. Jerry, over to you.
Great. Okay, thanks Emily, and thanks for the intro as an expert. I'm not sure I'm that, but hopefully I can share some experiences of my role and kind of the organisation that I work in. So morning everybody, lovely to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to present this morning. We're looking at values in a remote world. So my name is Jerry Melville. I'm the head of program management group at SSE. Work in the IT department there. This isn't my day job looking at values, but my day job is I head up the group that looks at all the governance and assurance across our IT projects. I also sit across the change agenda for IT from a top level. I run a pretty big team there, so instilling values into the team is really important. Some of the team are on today, which is great. So welcome to the team who joined today. But we've done a lot of change over the last year. I'll put this slide in just to kick off, really, to say everything's been turned, how we're looking at values through a different lens, and kind of how we're reacting to that and things we're doing differently. So one of the things I've talked about internally in SSE is around our values, which the values have been in. I've worked there for 5 years, but the values have been in place in SSE for over 14 years. But it's just how we've changed the lens on those this year and amplified some of them in a different way to bring out kind of the needs over the events in the last 9 to 12 months. So good to get your views on that as well. Hopefully by the end of the session, we can look at kind of sharing tools and techniques and all a little bit to go and try and apply those in our teams going forward, and hopefully can share some examples from SSE where we've hopefully driven some of the values in the right way over the last period as well. So great to be here. Just a quick thing on the chat, actually, really, just to understand kind of which organisations are on and kind of your roles would be good. I think Emily might just coordinate that, so just get a flavour of who's on just before we can run through the detail. But as Emily said as well, just really want to make this as interactive as possible, because probably don't want to hear me just talking for half an hour. So please chip in, and your examples and hints and tips as well as we go through will be absolutely fantastic. So looking forward to getting the discussion. But just let us know where you're kind of calling in from, and that would be great. Okay, Karen. Hi, Emily. Hi, Ria. Great. So you're getting a good cross section. Hi, Craig. Hi, Jonathan. Super. Okay, brilliant. Keep those coming in. That's great. Well, great to meet you all, albeit virtually. So, okay. So just moving on to kind of the first slide. Emily's just going to drive the slides for me. So thanks, Emily, for that. Just what we'll cover in the next 45 minutes or so. Just really not to suck eggs, but just to kind of just to re-clarify kind of the importance of company values, so why we have them. Some of the techniques at the top level that helps embed those within teams, and I'm able to share some examples that we've used in SSE to embed some of the values that have been in place, as I say, for quite a time. And then important for all of us as leaders, so hopefully in management or leadership roles, how we can role model those, and the importance of role modeling as a leader to kind of embed those values as well. So kind of 3 elements, and as I say, please chip in through each of these parts. I'm here just to help with the conversation to bring these values to life, because often they can just be written down and plastered on a wall, but then everyone does things differently. So it's really important that we can just talk about how we're bringing this to life, and particularly has been a huge focus on maybe some of your key values in the last year. Okay, just want to start with really just in the chat again, it's kind of what are your organisation's values? So a word or a few words, understanding of your own organisation values. So if you just set in the chat box.
It's a hard one to think of, isn't it, your organisational values? It's not something we sit back and reflect on very often. We've got some safety, that's a good one.
Angela, yep.
Safety at the moment.
Uniqueness, like that one. Flexibility. Just got a few more coming in.
Any others, guys? Just keep adding to the chat box.
Inspiring. Okay, great. I suppose a couple of things on that. So great, just keep those coming in. Inspire people. Super. maybe just flick to the next slide, Emily, if that's okay.
Yeah, we just had a couple of
Open committee and expert and inclusive.
Brilliant.
Optimistic and bold, fantastic. I think the thing with all of this is this slide is really saying they're all right answers. So I think probably two things on that. You know, really understanding how much you understand your own organisation's values. Are we able just to do those off the cuff, or would you have to think about those? But also kind of depending on the framing of kind of where your organisation is and the markets that they're in, that the values, there's no right or wrong answer really in terms of, but this is kind of a selection of some of the ones which obviously came out in the chat, some of the more common ones that are in there, so around collaboration, excellence, trust comes out a lot, efficiency, teamwork. I think I've seen that really over the last year. So and kind of the words and then really the definitions underneath those will bring these to life for your particular organisation in terms of behaviours, and we'll touch on that in a minute. So a good selection of things there, and yeah, enablement, collaboration, delivery, yeah, super. So engage with your own organisation values and understand kind of what they mean for you and for your teams. So just moving on. Okay, just on this slide, I just wanted to position, yeah, that's gone forward, thanks Emily. Just wanted to talk about where values sort of sit in the overall organisation life cycle, if you like, in terms of where they sit in this kind of jigsaw. If there's 4 parts to that, so starting with vision, kind of what do we want to be? So really important that the vision of your organisation is clear, that we're clear on what we're trying to achieve, and this will enable kind of the decision making within that. In terms of structuring that, it creates the direction for decision making within the organisation. I think next in that is where the values come in. So what do we believe in terms of executing that vision? So what do we believe? How are we creating a common language for our people to link behind? And the values really create the DNA of the organisation. They're the core really of how employees think and how we want them to operate. And it really embeds how those decisions are made. It enables that decision making. So really important to understand the values that we touched on. Following on from that is to carry out those values. What behaviours do we need to see on the ground? So how do we want people to act? How are they created, and how are they expressed in a way on the ground that the values are lived? So mentioned earlier around, don't just put the values up on the wall and then we're behaving in a way that doesn't live those values really. So really important to put the behaviours that are expected underneath the values in place, and then they really feed through to the structures in terms of how the behaviour is implied or applied into your structures, and really helps then to enable how we're really operating on the ground as well in terms of our teams and how our teams are operating together. And this needs to be done at kind of all levels, at a structural level, to ensure that behaviours are instilled and the values are being lived at that level. Really important in structures, this is the way they kind of operate in the structures and how they're maintained in everything we do in the structure, because that's the core really of the DNA of the team. So if the core of that is developing the culture in the organisation, if that's shifting or not being operating in the way that's desired, then that could have a bit of detrimental impact on kind of the performance. So all these 4 elements together feed into performance. So that's all just a context for values, that they don't stand alone. And whilst we understand our values, it's really important to understand how they fit into the organisation vision and how we're expecting people to behave and ourselves to behave, and within the organisation, how they fit through to how we operate in our structures. Coming through on the chat. Okay. So why are company values important? So at the top level, really important, I think 3 kind of streams at the top level before we get into some of the detail here. It's to aid the decision making. So how we operate, how our values aid our decision making. It helps prioritise our actions and our decisions in terms of the values that we believe. It helps bring the organisations together. So it's understood through collaboration. So again, one of the things we talk about here is how we build the values in an organisation collectively, rather than just a top-down approach and say, get on with living these values. So it has to be done collaboratively to be able to live within the teams. And then they can be translated into meaningful action, so the behaviours in terms of what people do on the ground, so which is a really important part. And I think they've all been amplified this year, and what we've seen over the, not over really the last year with the pandemic, but I think before that, in the importance of values has come more to life in terms of the way organisations operate. So lots of organisations now are moving to kind of businesses with conscience, and we're seeing it with kind of our own SSE organisation, where maybe a few years ago it was all about price capping and it was about paying too much for energy, where now our mantra is more around creating a net zero, world and things like that. So we're sort of linking to more the governmental, social kind of messaging around our vision, as opposed to, we're still important on customer satisfaction and those, but it's linking really in terms of the organisations really fitting more into more social conscience now going forward. So how the vision and values feed into that's really important. Important as well, the rigid structures and hierarchy in companies is being broken now as well, because individuals really developing their own roles and more flexibility around roles. So again, ensuring the values can be deployed, top down and bottom up, and with individuals developing their own roles, having that understanding of values that instill into those roles helps with that to create consistency and that common understanding across the team. And again, aligns all of those things as well. The values align in terms of how we're delivering the strategy and the vision for the organisation. Just some of the call outs here really around giving individuals the motivation and rally cry to unite behind. Values will enable us to do that. The term we use in SSE is around, it creates the bedrock for how an organisation operates. So it's really our DNA in terms of how we operate, and things like safety, sustainability, teamwork are kind of three of our core values, which we've really brought to life in the last year. That last slide just showing it's the glue really between the strategy and how the teams work. So it's that linkage, really important, that how we believe we're operating the vision is important. It provides a common language of understanding for people on the ground or on our teams. It describes and promotes how we work together, and it articulates an aspiration of what good looks like. So teams can unite behind that, and we give people the indication of what our aspirations are and how we need to behave and act to get to those aspirations. And as I said before, it's really the DNA of organisations. So we wouldn't want to be changing the values that often, but we can change the lens on them depending on the situation. It's very key. So we're just going to do a poll, I think, on the next one, Emily, just to sort of bring that out a little bit more. Really around what you've seen in your own organisations and what you've done differently. Just flip to the next slide, I think, Emily, if that's okay.
Oh.
Yeah, so here is about have your organisation's values changed in the remote world? If we look over the last year, simple sort of yes or no or partly. If you just want to do the poll, that'd be great.
Hi, it's got a thing saying we can't vote.
Oh.
Won't let me click the button.
That's not ideal, is it? Hold on a minute. I've not had that before. Is anyone else finding the same thing?
It's saying that panelists and hosts can't vote.
Let's see if I can. There, is that letting you vote?
Yeah.
I thought you were all just being very quiet on me there.
Thank
there
you.
We go. There we go, guys. We're nearly there. A couple of you left to vote still. Okay, great. There we go. Jerry, can you see the results okay?
Brilliant. Yep, so we've got just over 70% haven't. So, and then we've got 14% yes and 14% partly. So, if comfortable, the ones who put yes or partly, they just want to share kind of how they've changed, how the lens on those has changed.
Oh yeah, it's Helen.
Either in the chat or just to come off mute.
Yeah, it's Helen. I think our organisation has always has had strong values, but I think during the kind of pandemic part, I think we've seen a shift in terms of tolerance for remote working and that type of thing. Prior to the pandemic, it was kind of seen as a bad thing, and I think the organisation is valuing that a bit more now.
Yeah. And do you see that, Helen, as a change of the value, or just the way that one of the values has been sort of amplified a bit more?
Yeah, I think it's more about the amplification. That's kind of why I put partly, because I think we've always had the values, but the pandemic has kind of forced people to really let go of kind of old world thinking and really embrace, the efficiency and sustainability, have been able to the things that we've had to do during the pandemic.
Yeah, great, thank you. And Jonathan in the chat, our values changed as they were due to reviewed anyway. It must be coincidental there. Okay, good. Any others who replied yes, that they have changed?
I think the majority have said no. I think out of everyone on here, the majority of people have said no, they haven't changed, which is interesting.
Basically, it's more in terms of yes, right. But it's amplified a bit.
Slide on, Emily, if you don't mind.
Oh, Jerry, I think there's a delay on yours.
Yeah, yeah. So just to share kind of how that is, but just really.
Amit, I think you were making a point.
Sorry, Emily.
Sorry, I think.
Yeah, basically,
just lead a bit of a conversation around ones where they can modify.
Yeah, what I was saying is I have put yes, but it's more about amplified what you call values, which has come into place as remote working, as previously working from home was considered not good too often. But now, since the pandemic has become, it's the way to go forward. Likewise, having team meetings, not in the meeting rooms, but like online, is also one of the visions and the way forward, so that we can use maximum utilization of the utilities and the tools. So that's how we are now progressing.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. Thank you, Amit.
Yeah.
Right, I'll stop sharing results. Okay.
Does anybody else like to share kind of any of the lenses that have changed on the, got a couple of good examples from Helen and Amit. Any others that really have seen the different application of the values in the last year?
I could probably add another one. I think for us, I think we've always had a strong teamwork ethic, but obviously we've really seen people come together, I think, and really looking out for each other during the, during this time. I think people have made extra efforts to make sure mental health is okay for everyone, and I think that's been really strong.
Yeah, great.
I think that raises a really good point, Helen. I think I
like you say, Helen, on that one, I think yeah.
You're right, Jerry.
Carry on, Emily. Sorry.
Karen's added to the chat box here as well. Jerry, I think your screen's frozen.
Can you hear me now? You see me now?
We can hear you. Your screen's frozen, but that's okay. Shall I read out what Karen's popped in? So Karen's added, I think that trust has really increased with more people working from home, and agree with the teamwork ethic. We have really seen this in spades. Our welfare and wellbeing pages are growing and offer a huge amount of support. So I think there's this kind of common goal, isn't there, that a lot of people are saying that, people are focusing a lot more on well-being and mindset and mental health, and that's great that these values are being recognised and driven a little bit more in organisations. I think that's good. There seems to be a common theme there, which is great.
No, absolutely. I've turned my video off, so hopefully you can hear me now a bit clearer.
I can hear you much better now.
Yeah, so I'll put my mugshot up a bit later on again, but you'll be able to see me to start with. But I think that's a really important point, that one around the trust and things as well. And I did write an internal article recently about bizarrely, in terms of looking at a different lens, where meeting with the team face to face, you kind of sometimes, previously maybe getting straight into work mode, but actually just seeing people in their own homes and things like that. And I've encouraged people to put videos on and things like that at home, so you're kind of seeing the real rounded person and that as well. So I think it's opened up different conversations within the team, and I think Helen's in my team. I hope that's been a positive thing, that we're kind of seeing the all-round real individual, and having different conversations we would have a year ago. So it's looking at the positives from that, as well as kind of all the good things that are happening in face-to-face meetings. But hopefully we're seeing kind of a wider spectrum of individuals in terms of their life and kind of the demands on lives and things as well. So it's kind of how they play into kind of team meetings and things going forward as well.
Definitely. I think people have got far more comfortable with using camera, whereas, prior to the pandemic, although that option was there, no one really was using it.
Yeah. And I think some of the things that were taboo before, dogs barking or, someone walking behind, was sort of frowned upon. It's just natural now, in terms of that's expected, and we just get on with things. So I think there's much more tolerance to those sort of things, or that's just part of the course now, which is good. Things that might have been tutted at before are now kind of second nature in a positive way. Okay.
Yeah. Get to know everyone's puppies.
Yeah, I think that has generated sort of different conversations, I think, which is a positive in terms of just building rapport across the teams, which is quite important.
Do you want me to just move on, Joe, to the next slide?
Yeah, shall I move on? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's really good. Thanks for all the input on that. I think we just touched on that. The different lens is really important. One of the sort of themes we're trying to sort of instill today was about, the values can stay constant, but how we just looking at the way we can amplify the lens within it at a particular situation that changes, rather than changing the core value. Okay. Yeah, so some of the techniques kind of I've used into the team, and these are not exhaustive by any means, so it'd be good to hear kind of some of the techniques that you've used, but really from when we're running our teams, how we're using some of the tools and techniques to ensure we can embed fit for purpose values within the team. So I think what I said was very important, that we just don't write them in a darkened room, post them on the wall and say, there's our values, go and live your values. So it's about how you operate and how they operate now. That's that lens bit in terms of what it's doing. So have the discussion, discuss, what the values mean to each individual, and how has this changed? As individual circumstances change, how do they see the values relating to them personally? And how do they need to live those, and the flexible working and things like that play into that as well, in terms of more of the relevant ones this year, and things like that. So again, just the lens for the individual, how it feeds in, because they may see it slightly differently, but we're getting the common understanding at the top level. Shared sense making about what good looks like right now. So sharing stories, into the team, in terms of the areas that we've touched on, particularly around team working, also to really articulate by these actions, this is what good looks like, and this is what good looks like right now, and we brought that to life, I think, in SSE around kind of decision making and things like that as well. So streamlining some things and taking more of a risk appetite to situations as well, really understanding kind of the implications of that, and communicating that and making sense of that with the team is really important. Change the lens and bring them to life for the team. So yeah, what maybe wasn't a routine thing before is now can be kind of done as a second nature. Circumstances change. It's right that we change kind of our behaviours in terms of living our values and how we operate on the ground. And a key one really is about all of these feed into that. We've talked on the earlier slide about how we embed values, how we do things, embed those into your team performance, reward and recognition system. So yeah, what we deliver is very important, but how we deliver it with the right values and the right behaviours equally important. So really promoting that as well, about doing things the right way into your team is good, and promoting that good value and that good way of working. So it's just a few sort of to kick off, but be keen just to understand or get any feedback of other techniques that anybody else is using, or whether you agree with these ones, or any other comments on this one? Do they make sense?
Yeah, I think I've seen all of those in our company, and I think one of the strongest ones was actually the bottom point was also to bring it to life. It was when they launched our values, they really did make them part of the reward performance. So we always had a performance element which was to do with our our work output, but there was also a strong values performance.
Yeah.
And I really did see in the company, throughout the company, from the top down, everyone was living and breathing them, and they were part of every discussion. It really did make a good rollout, and make it become a strong part of our culture.
Keeping them on the agenda is very important.
Oh. Karen's added to the chat group saying they do make sense. We use our B's and B's in our performance management, and they're used in recruitment too. And that's a good one, actually, considering how we're using them in recruitment and how they're being used for like onboarding purposes.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think as leaders and managers, as we're recruiting, it's a really important one, because often, individuals who I've interviewed quite recently will ask, what are your company values? So I think people want to be matched with their personal values, with the value of the organisation they work for. So that's why it's really important, us as leaders and managers, to understand what our values are and to role model them, because it's how it plays in terms of recruitment and things like that, and retention is quite important from that point of view, as we bring new people into the team. It's much more important now, I think, back to that point around people want to bring and develop roles, but want to sit in a value structure that fits with their own values.
100%. Jerry, I have a question on this, actually. I can put this out to everybody, but from someone that maybe isn't in a leadership position, can they still drive values within their team? Does it have to come from top down, or can this be driven from a lower level?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's say it can't really come top down. I think it has to be done kind of top down, bottom up, because I think they have to be collaboratively agreed. Otherwise, you don't get the buy-in to the values and the behaviours. You can't just tell people how to do something differently or to believe something differently. So I think it's really important that that it is built collaboratively, and individuals on the ground to have the conversation around it's important how we deliver things rather than as well as what we deliver. So I think I'd encourage those conversations at all levels, because it's really important that the team gel on what the values are and how we're living in them and how we're operating them, at every level. It's a really good question.
Yeah, Emily, I've actually had that experience of as a team lead of a small team, getting together with my team and even just, we had team values that we drove that kind of supported the core company values, but we kind of created those ourselves, and kind of tried to almost start a revolution, of people actually driving the values from the ground upwards.
Yeah.
So it is really key, and I think you almost don't have to wait for company values. It helps because obviously you make sure you've got the right direction, but I think it is really, really strong getting your team involved and as an individual, finding ways to kind of emulate the values so that people can see you living them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Karen's added some really good points. Her audio's not working, but she's added some great points there, Jerry, if you wanted to reference them.
Yeah, no, really good, because I think that point around those who are role modelling behaviours need to be acknowledged and rewarded. I think that's into that performance culture, rewarding with the right values and behaviours. Yeah, so I think definitely driving those at all levels is really key. Otherwise, they are just kind of management thing or a leadership thing that actually don't drive consistency of approach and drive the right behaviours in the team. So excellent. Okay, good.
Interesting on the recruitment part as well, because I remember we had a strong drive with our values, particularly in the newer, years after they were newly released, that it was almost like you could teach somebody technically to do a job, but you can't necessarily teach them the values. So it was really key to recruit people with the right value set.
Yeah.
And then you could train them to technically do the job.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
No, it's good. And I think that one, just sort of the safety one that was put up earlier is a key SSE one, for example. And safety, so I said I've been with SSE for 5 years, and safety was about reverse parking, holding handrails, and things like that, which are all key things. So not saying they're not valuable, but obviously the emphasis in the last year was about safety, about offices, and safety about people working at home, and lots of safety into the team around mental health and things like that. So again, that's a good example of kind of that lens just changing on, the value is safety, but the emphasis is on a different thing depending on the situation. Okay, should we just move to the last slide, Emily, if that's okay? I think the last one with, so just wanted to talk about role modeling for us as leaders and managers, really, and some tools here or important things to do in trying to instill the values. So again, be good to get your view on these. Communication is key, communication and engagement, really, and tell and share stories of how these values have come to life. So we talk a lot about what we deliver, but really sharing stories about the way things are being delivered is really important, or the way we're operating is really important. I think show vulnerability as a leader is really important as well. So I've said in meetings, and Helen and Angela will probably verify that we're doing an experiment on some things, but we're not perfect, and I think it's good that as leaders and managers we're kind of open to that, in terms of and accept challenges as well if we're not deemed to be kind of living values and things as well. So showing vulnerability as a leader around values is important, and just really accepting that we're going to get things wrong, but to learn from those. Creating value moments. We have safety moments. We probably don't do enough of this at the moment in SC, really, but what are the value moments? So something to think about. Can we bring those out? Recognizing those simple thank you and things like that is important. It doesn't always have to be a gift or monetary kind of piece, but looking at value moments in meetings or certain events is always a good role model of how the values are important. This piece around not just plastering on the wall and then doing something completely different. So you have to kind of walk the talk, getting consistency, but what you say and what you do is very important. Otherwise, they don't have credibility in terms of embedding them. Calling out poor behaviour, obviously in the right way, and remembering kind of if you kind of permit poor behaviour, kind of promoting it. So really important to call that out. But instill that in the behaviours that it's good to challenge, and we have that in SSC around appropriate challenge on things like safety and security, and it became second nature. It wasn't kind of a personal attack, but doing things for the right way for continuous improvement. And then signposting how decisions are made, or not just really giving the decision, but what's the process? Are we following our values in line with our kind of vision about how we're making decisions and ensuring that we're operating the values and behaviours to do that? So just some things here which help from a role modelling perspective to help bring those to life, and to say trying to instill that if your teams can see you doing these things, they can hopefully mirror these as well going forward. I'll just pause there really in terms of do they look like good ideas? Any other things that people are doing that helps role model kind of values in your teams?
I think to add a note to that, Jerry, one of the ones that I was looking at there is the showing vulnerability, which I think is so important. And that kind of goes in all walks of life. But I think especially when we're trying to drive values from any kind of position, I think showing that we're all human, that we're all, we're all maybe perhaps struggling with something, or just having some open honesty, and that kind of open dialogue is so important, isn't it? To make sure that you're all on the same page and that you're all working towards this common goal.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Probably nothing to add, but that one for me, I don't know if anyone else looks at any, but that stood out for me on there as probably a really key one. What does everyone else think? Does anyone have any other thoughts on any of these that are kind of standing out to them?
I think consistency is a really good one, because otherwise people will start to not believe the values if you're not living and breathing them.
Yep.
Yeah, I would agree. Anyone else got any thoughts?
Can you throw a light on calling out poor behavior? So that will be like one-to-one, or it will be within the team, because that should not be taken in another way.
About the calling out poor behaviours. Sorry, it cut out, just slightly glitched at the beginning there. Sorry, Amit, it cut out again then, so I couldn't hear the format. Can you say it again for me, Amit?
Yeah. Basically, what I was talking is exactly how do you execute calling out poor behavior, because whether it will be one-to-one or it will be within the team, because it should not be taken in another way as a leader.
Yeah, you're right. That's a difficult one, isn't it? What do you think, Jerry?
Yeah, well, I think both. I think depending on every situation is different, isn't it? I think again, with sort of feedback timeliness is important, in terms of calling that out. But clearly, if it probably more, be weighted at probably one-to-one. You won't want to embarrass anybody either. But depending on the situation, if it was a team situation that didn't demonstrate the values, you might do a separate kind of call with the team sort of thing. But you just have to take it on individual case-by-case basis, really.
Yeah, perfect.
But I think anything with feedback is like generating it, to giving some feedback myself many years ago around giving feedback is to kind of build a relationship rather than break a relationship. So giving them that feedback to improve and continuously improve, and for the individuals to improve.
I agree. I think it's a fine line between showing anyone who's witnessed poor behaviour that it isn't tolerated and it's not acceptable, versus it's not really good to shame people in public necessarily, but it is important that people see that poor behaviours aren't acceptable.
Because again, it's the credibility on the behaviours just will go, because people are operating in the way that they're not designed, and no one's calling that out. So but it's sensitivity around this one for sure. But taking that on a sort of case-by-case basis.
I think another point on this, I wonder what everyone else thinks on this, but something that comes to my mind as well is about calling out perhaps your own, not poor behaviours, but maybe say even if in like a leadership position, or for example, we had someone new join our team recently. Now I have children at home, so therefore my time's a bit more compromised at the moment, and therefore I've moved my working hours around a little bit. So if I take an extra hour or two out during the day, I just add it on in the evening. But what I'm conscious of is the new starter coming in. Do I want to set the expectation of we all work till 9 o'clock at night? And, obviously that's my circumstance. So sometimes as well, again, pulling back to open dialogue, but also calling out my behaviour and saying, I'm doing this, and explaining the circumstance, and just knowing that that's not the expectation as well. And I think, I don't know if anyone else can relate to that, but I think that's quite important as well, because it goes back to that, what values are considered, like, is that something we should be considering in high regard, that we should be working at 9 o'clock at night? Obviously it's circumstance specific.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think sometimes I've seen kind of contrast in values where the value is about, say, for example, personal sustainability, but then you get questioned if you were leaving the office at 5 o'clock. People were looking at you as if like, oh, you're not committed. So it is important that you kind of check yourself if you are calling out behaviours that don't tie in with the values. And it's really strong when someone says, no, we do as a company believe in this, and therefore, I'm going to check check how I carry that out.
Yeah, exactly.
I think on the flexibility one, I did see a really good one the other day, actually, and I don't have it on my emails at the moment, but the individual signs off their emails, because often they're obviously doing a working pattern where they work in the evening, things like that, and they said, I've sent this email at working time, which is convenient for me. Please respond to this email in your convenient time or your working hours. So it wasn't an expectation that they get an immediate response if that was sent out at 9 o'clock at night, for example. So it was just a good way of saying, they've sent out, they've changed their working hours, so it's convenient for them, but respond in your own operating kind of hours. That's sort of a simple change that can make and try and sort of alleviate some of that concern that if you do see something ping through late at night, you feel you've got to respond to it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it is that setting the expectation that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, and back to that communication piece, I suppose, isn't it, around communicating to the team that we may be sending things outside of regular hours, but there isn't an expectation that people be logged on in the evening. You can do it at the very top level, something like that, in terms of setting the scene, and then calling out that it's not happening where people are sending anything at 8 o'clock and expecting a response by 8:15 in the evening or something like that. So keep that dialogue going, really, about how they're being lived.
Perfect. Okay.
I think I've just got one more slide before we sort of open up for any wider questions, really, just to try and sum up some of the key points from the session. Just some takeaways. Let's try and put my camera back on. I don't know if you can see me again now, but so the key takeaways, I think, just from summing up, some really good discussions, some really great points. So thanks for all those. Hopefully sort of summed up into here some takeaways to look at in terms of valuing, and the values are the glue and integral to an organisation. Understanding their link to the vision, understanding their link to the behaviours, and understanding how we operate on the ground. So really key jigsaw piece in that picture, and understanding the other three elements is crucial and really important. Strong values in your organisation, values, they're strong and being in place, they shouldn't change. They're the DNA of the organisation. Changing the DNA every week is not a great thing. It's just looking at how we could change the lens on them. So amplifying sort of some of the behaviours that support the values, some of the actions that support the values is really a preferred approach, rather than changing your values on a regular basis. As we talked about, discuss, understand, communicate, and bring them to life in your team. So having the team discussions, embedding them into team meetings, and really sort of role modeling them within teams. And then role model your values, say that one really, and lead the way. So really important in credibility, walk the talk as well, to live the values and be prepared for challenge on also supporting, coaching, and challenging individuals where you're not seeing those displayed into the team as well. So hopefully just a couple of few points here just to link in, which sort of sum up kind of the areas that we've talked about.
Perfect.
And I think then we're just going to open up for the final 5 or 10 minutes. I think, Emily, weren't we, for any general questions? And hopefully that was useful, and a refresher for some, hopefully some new things for others. Hopefully taking away a couple of things that we can do differently.
Fab. Thank you, Jerry. I think I don't know about everyone else, but it's certainly been really good for me to sit back and reflect on. I think values is something we don't necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis, but it's something that we should absolutely be taking responsibility in whatever position we're in to be driving. Guys, we've got a little bit of time for Q&A, so we've got 5-10 minutes. What questions have you got for Jerry? You can put them in the chat box, or you can take off your sound and ask them. I know I've got a couple. Oh. Thanks, Amit.
Okay, thanks, Amit.
Anyone got any questions? Or you're all too busy self-reflecting?
Yeah, but hopefully some useful hints and tips, and if nothing else, I'll say just really a reflection on them, because often we kind of take for granted, but just re-engaging and the words, the definition words underneath the kind of the strap line of a value is really important, how we amplifying the things that are important at this particular moment.
One that's just come through to me actually from someone's website. is around, should values have to adapt to this current climate? Should they have changed, in your personal opinion, Jerry, throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, so I've said in here, and I've said on the previous kind of panel, that we've changed the lens on the values. So our values have been in place for 14 years, but say the safety one, for example, some of the things there, it was more about driving and office safety and things like that, where it's been much more to mental health safety and kind of people working at home and everything as well. So the lens on it's changed. The actual value has remained constant. We've also looked at things like efficiency. When we were, we've got quite tough, and I set across governance, but we had a lot of decision-making forums and things like that. So when we're looking at our efficiency, it was really looking at how do we do things more quickly. So, our risk appetite under efficiency increased, because then we couldn't have multiple boards when things were hitting in March and April, providing electricity to key services. We had to make very quick decisions. So really playing that into our decision making around that, just changing the emphasis on it. The risk appetite kind of underneath efficiency was broadened from those sort of things. So it wasn't an overhaul of the values, it was kind of a refresh of kind of how we're behaving against those values.
Yeah. Okay.
And that ties into your question, Helen, that's come through around, should we refresh them? I think we should refresh kind of the behaviours underneath it.
Oh, you've frozen again then, Jerry. You disappeared off. Has anyone got any other questions?
Yeah, sorry, Emily. I've put my camera off now, so hopefully that's better.
Anyone got any other questions to Jerry, or anything you wanted to add to that final point? And how often do you think this should happen? Jerry's given his opinions. Anyone got any differing opinions to that? We're all deep in thought. Okay. Okay, let's begin to wrap up then. So if there's no final questions for Jerry, we'll come back to the main screen. I would like to do a couple of little kind of final notes. So one, a massive thank you to Jerry for today. I think you'll all agree with me, that was really insightful, some really, really good content there, some really key things for us to take away and start applying straight away. So thank you very much, Jerry, for giving us an hour of your time this morning to share.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. Hopefully it was useful and I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
And for everyone that's attended today, I will be sending a feedback form around to you all, which will require just you guys like a minute or two of your time to fill it in. Feedback's so important to us to make sure we're putting on the right events. We've had a very quick question come through from Helen, which I'm going to ask you because we've got a spare minute. And she just said, how important do you think it is to refresh company value? Oh, hold on, that's weird. That's the same question. It's just popped up again on my screen. It's like a new one. So I apologise, Helen. No, we've covered that. I thought it was a new one that had just come through.
Right, got it. So good it came through twice.
I don't know what's going on with the chat box there, but it's having a little bit of a moment. For those of you that haven't already, I'm going to plug it just finally because it's nearly up to submission time. We have our Rita Awards, the Real IT Awards, that will be happening probably virtually in May. We've run these awards for years and years, very, very popular awards. We've already had over 130 downloads of the submission form, and submissions are starting to come in this week, but the closing date for those is the 3rd of February. If you haven't already checked it out, please have a look on our website, on the CITF website. There's a link to the Rita Awards. You can have a look at the different categories, download the submission form, and you can put in an entry as a team for your category. And I think it's so important. Last year, we have done so much hard work. You guys as technologists have worked incredibly hard and done some amazing things. And we want to hear your stories. We want to promote that. We want to see what you guys are doing. So get those over to us. Check it out on the website. You've got literally until the 3rd next week. If you need an extension, write in. We might be able to allow a day or two, but try and get those over to us ASAP if you haven't already. And finally, just thank you for your time today, everyone.